my name is Rory Joscelyne. I am a friend of Steve McCartney and a fellow filmmaker in the local area. And he has invited me onto his channel to have a look at his Criterion collection and to talk about some of my experiences with some of Criterion's films. So, yeah, join me on this wonderful journey as we have a look at his collection. The first one I want to start with, I think, has to be Wages of Fear. This is obviously his copy, but I have my own. I love Wages of Fear. I remember watching it as a kid with my dad. It was kind of, I wouldn't say one of my first forays into black and white, because I'd grown up watching a lot of the Marx Brothers as well. But certainly when it came to sort of more serious black and white film, because it's not really a horror or, you know, too intense, but it is such a great tension movie. It manages to get that pace right with it's staggering all of its dangers and all of the tragedies that happen to this foursome along the way as they drive the two trucks across South America. I have actually seen, and I haven't seen it in here yet, but it is probably in here, Sorcerer, which is basically a remake, and I prefer Wages of Fear personally. The reason is the black and white nature of it kind of helps, but also I think the tension is a little bit more perfect. I also prefer the intro of how we meet the four characters at the island location. Sorcerer does it very differently, where it kind of does this guy, and then you see how he got there, this guy, and you see how he got there. Some people may prefer that. It's just not my preferred method of meeting people. Personally, if I was to remake something like this, I would love to do it where you mostly meet the characters on the journey. So as you get a little bit of stuff at the beginning, but you learn more about them talking in their dialogue during the journey. But either way, I mean, this is a fantastic film. And it took me ages to find a decent version of it, because I remember my dad recorded it off the telly onto VHS. That was how long ago it was. And when he came to buying a DVD version of it, there were so many versions he bought, and they were terrible. They were bad image quality. There was some where you couldn't read the subtitles because they were too blown out against the image. And most of them, if not all of them, were cut in a way where they were all missing scenes. So when I got to the point where I was looking to buy the film, Criterion had released one. I was like, well, the one thing you can guarantee with Criterion is that it's going to be the full film. So it made it a no-brainer, basically. I think this was the first movie I ever bought from Criterion. It was either this or Seventh Seal. But yeah, I would always recommend that one. That's a fantastic movie. Seconds. Seconds is one of those films. I think the middle is the weakest part, but actually the beginning and the outro certainly are harrowing. They're brilliant. Rock Hudson is probably the only Rock Hudson film I've seen so far, because I'm a little bit newer to this than Steve. But yeah, fantastic movie. I would love to see a remake of it. I think this is a film that you could remake quite well, because the weakness is in the second half, or the middle part, second act. And you could probably add a little bit more depth to that than you could at the time, or just with the fact that, you know, this has been made and you can find the things to fix. But I doubt you would top the finale. The finale would be very difficult to break. There's some. This was one of the first films that showed plastic surgery, and basically the cameramen were like, "I'm not filming that." So the director himself, I believe John Frankenheimer, did some of the actual photography for the plastic surgery scenes, because his cameramen wouldn't do it. And it is legit. You can see them pulling bits of face off and things like that. So that's kind of bold, but somehow the ending completely gets over that. By the time you get to the end, you're like, oh my God. So I absolutely love that about Seconds. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. So I bought this film initially, weirdly enough, not because of David Bowie, actually because of Takeshi Kitano, who plays the Japanese intern camp leader. Ever since I was a teenager, I got into the movie canon of Takeshi Kitano, or beat Takeshi Kitano, starting from Violent Cop and moving on from there. Obviously, this was before his first actual movie-making experience, because he's now quite a storied director. This is when he was an actor, mostly a performer. The interesting thing with Takeshi Kitano is that his TV persona, I went to Japan in 2006 or 2007, and I bought a DVD box set of a lot of his TV work. And his TV work is stand-up comedy and ridiculous things. Like he did a comedy version of Blind Date, where he had a young woman having to pick between three men, as they normally do. But in the end, they replaced the man on the other side with the most ancient man in this wheelchair, like really old. So when they pulled the wall back, she starts having a panic attack and screaming, and they're just sitting there pointing and laughing at her. It's that sort of comedy. So when it's kind of strange that that's his TV stuff, and in Japan, that's what he's most known for. Takeshi's Castle is Beat Takeshi. He is the Takeshi of Takeshi's Castle. Whereas when it comes to films, he does serious roles, like in Merry Christmas and Lawrence. And probably the most accessible of his movies, I don't know if Criterion ever released it, I don't think they did, is Brother. But he's done a lot of other films as well, such as Hanabi and Kikajiro. Those two are two of my favourites. I also really like Sonishine. But yeah, so I came to this because of Takeshi Kitano. Having said that, David Bowie, an absolute presence in the film as well. It stands out. Poor bugger getting buried in the sand. That's now become an infamous thing that gets parodied in various movies, and it all comes from here. So yeah, absolute high ratings for that film. Sweet Smell of Success. Now, weirdly enough, I have seen this film. I love this film. I love Burt Lancaster when he does dramatic roles. So I've also seen 7 Days in May, which I think is also a fantastic film. I don't think Criterion released that one yet, but Warner did a really good Blu-ray release for that. But Sweet Smell of Success, Tony Curtis, Burt Lancaster. I loved it. It's a great black and white noir thriller and it's based on a true story I imagine somewhat loosely, of a journalist who you believe is involved in a lot of, let's say, more nefarious dealings than the journalism he's supposed to be providing. And this film absolutely grabs you with the tension of it. You're almost sweating with the men in the room because it seems to be very hot where they are, and you can feel the tension just build and build and build. There are elements of this script. I love this script because it is so noir it almost hurts itself. It doesn't matter what the statement is. It could just be like, I need to go for a walk, and it'll just be like, it's time to get up and do the old clippity clap. There's almost everything has to have like a weird noirish way of being phrased, to a point where there's a couple of times I'm like, oh, piss off, you don't have to do that. But I absolutely love it for that as well. It really stands out. So no, massive fan of Sweet Smell of Success.
Joanna Barnsley and Greg Snyder from the Metropolitan Police Department. Can you open the door, please?
My husband's asleep.
Your heat signature's the only one in the flat.
It's not a crime to want a child.
Then you should have registered.
I can't earn £24,000 a year by myself. Minimum wage doesn't pay that.
You earn your privilege in this country.
If you don't comply within 5 seconds, my colleague will be forced to breach your door.
And that won't be good for you, your door, or my foot.
"12 Angry Men." Henry Fonda, directed by Sidney Lumet, I love Sidney Lumet films. I've seen quite a few of them, and he always knows exactly how to pick where the drama comes in. And 12 Angry Men is a perfect example of that, because it was a stage play. It basically all takes place in one room, which you'd think on a filmic sense, what's the point? Why would you can't go anywhere, you can't see anything. The drama ramps perfectly. Just at any point where you could lose interest, it's like, oh, bam, here comes something else. And the 12 characters play off each other perfectly. I think there was a benefit sometimes to... It doesn't happen so much anymore because theatre has fallen out of favour as a mainstream media form. It still happens, but not quite in the same way. Usually musicals tend to be the big names. But certainly back in this era, theatre was still incredibly popular. We used to get phenomenally written theatre plays that would then find their ways as film scripts. Another film that's not the same as this, but is similar in terms of how it's done that more recently, is The Sunset Limited, with Tommy Lee Jones, and it was directed by him as well, and Samuel L. Jackson, with two characters, white and black. You can guess which is which. But the point is it's about black saves white from trying to commit suicide at a train station, and then he tries to convince him out of committing suicide, trying to be like the Good Samaritan. And it goes through this huge moral dilemma. Fantastic film. Again, I would love to see a Criterion release of that, because the only Blu-ray of that, I think, must have been in some sort of limited initial run, and they go for hundreds of pounds now. But 12 Angry Men essentially is the originator of that type of film style, at least in the pop lexicon. 12 Angry Men is 12 men in a room arguing about whether someone should be given the death penalty or not. Sounds basic as hell, but the idea is that it seems to be a cut and dried thing. Yeah, he's guilty. Everyone agrees he's guilty. He's got to burn. Fine. And then just one guy says, but what if it's not? And it starts this whole tirade of him trying to convince everyone in that room, or just by going through the facts, potentially changing everyone's minds as to whether or not the potential culprit is guilty or innocent. The tension in this is fantastic. My favourite is this guy number 3. He's the last one to change his mind, and the reason for it is because it's emotional. It's attached to something in his personal life, and that gives it so much more gravitas. When you get to that finale, it's like, he's got to burn. It's just that whole, just the anger all comes out there. And also the direction is phenomenal in terms of it starts up high and then looking down on people, so it feels a bit more open. And as the film goes on, the camera comes down and then looks straight up at the actors from underneath. The lighting darkens, we get rain outside. It pulls in close as well, so we're no longer as far away. The room feels tight, cramped, really claustrophobic, and it feels like it's about to explode, like a powder keg just about to go off. I love 12 Angry Men, and again, it's one of those examples of a film that manages to do everything it needs to, convince anyone it needs to convince, and deliver a really heart-powering story. Not a single swear word. We seem to be in a dearth of that at the moment. It seems to be like, hey, if I want to make sure that this film has power, we'll just throw in the F-bomb here, we'll do that. Which I don't mind, but 12 Angry Men proves that you can actually do a really deep, poignant story without someone having to swear every other word. So, yeah, huge amount of respect for 12 Angry Men. Repo Man. So, I didn't actually introduce the film studio that I own, which is Cyberpunk Studios. Now, Reaper Man is kind of Cyberpunk adjacent, I suppose, in that it's got a very kind of cult-ish element to it, and it's to do with someone and their nuclear, some sort of weird nuclear substance in someone's boot. There's definitely a lot of punk in it, for sure, as you can tell by Criterion's design of the artwork. It's a fantastic film. It's not a pop film, I will say that for sure. If anyone's expecting big bang explosions, then you're in the wrong place. But it's definitely something that makes you think, because you never find out what's in the boot. You assume it's something radioactive, something toxic maybe, because whoever ends up driving the car always ends up sort of decaying over the course. So you would imagine it's something radioactive, but you never get a confirmation, you never find out what's in the boot. And it kind of adds this query, where did it come from and why is it being shipped around? That's a great... if you're after something a bit more indie and punk, that's definitely the way to go. Night of the Living Dead. George A. Romero, one of his earlier films, if not his first film. I've managed to see this because I do another podcast called Second Take Cinema, which is on Impala Films streaming network, and we reviewed this film. So I hadn't seen it before because, I'll be honest, my horror knowledge is quite limited, or was. I've seen a lot more now because we did quite a lot of horror films for that show, and Night of the Living Dead was one that we had to cover, being one of the seminal works, probably one of the first ever proper zombie movies. And actually it's a good film because even the zombies are weird. I give no credence to the zombies in it because they're just men with white faces going. They don't act like what we'd expect modern zombies to act like, which is sort of that half rotten look. Generally, they just seem to be like almost crazed people. But the real drama isn't with the zombies, it's with the people in the house locked into a very tense situation as the zombies are knocking on the door outside. Weirdly enough, I more recently watched Assault on Precinct 13 and felt that there was a very similar edge to both of them, in that the criminals in Assault on Precinct 13, the original, not the remake, they act a lot more like a zombie flick. You don't really get much knowledge as to why. You get a smidge of it, but there doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason for the criminals in Assault on Precinct 13 to attack the precinct. And again, it's how the people locked in the precinct then have to try and, utilise whatever they've got to try and survive. Very similar to Night of the Living Dead. You could potentially say it's almost like a pseudo remake, but it gets around it by not including the horror element as much as including the crime element. But yeah, somehow manages it in a different genre entirely. But Night of the Living Dead is a very good film. If you're into... I'm not sure modern audiences in general would like Night of the Living Dead, because whatever's in here has been done in other movies more recently. But if you're into film history, and if you're watching Criterion films, you're into film history, then Night of the Living Dead is definitely one that you've got to see. The Graduate. I hadn't seen this film until Steve came into my life, because I met Steve through acting in theatre when I was a wee lad. And one of the first plays that I did, well, actually the first one I starred in, and I think it was the third play I'd done with the group, was The Graduate. And I played the titular role here. I was slimmer back then. And basically, I had a strange time in that my Mrs. Robinson and my Elaine Robinson were played by lesbian actors, which, when you have to do a sex scene, is quite embarrassing for a man. When someone goes, "That's not how it's done, Rory." When you're only like 19, you're like, "Oh." They were lovely, actually. They were lovely people, and it was a great play. I absolutely loved performing it. Obviously, as part of it, Steve told me not to watch the film before we did the performance, and then after we'd done, because he didn't want me to try and emulate Dustin Hoffman. And then once we'd finished the play, he showed it to me to basically show me what all the fuss was about. And it's a good film. It's not really my taste in general, but I have to say, yeah, getting seduced with the leg, yeah. I'll be honest, this isn't one of my favourites, but I did have a good time watching it, and it is quite funny watching him get more and more brown as the film goes on, because he just sits outside getting more and more tanned. I remember when we did the play, we gave me a fake spray tan, and I only at the time wore sort of electric blue shirts, and my girlfriend at the time, after I got the spray tan, I walked down the high street to meet her, and she was like, "I saw you coming, you look like a traffic light." She had bright orange skin and electric blue shirts. But no, good movie. Not my taste, but it's popular for a reason. It's a very good film within its genre.